Scalpback Squad, good morning. Today's mission: cut losses, lock profits, rinse and repeat. Let's go ahead and dive into the charts. Let's do a top-down analysis. Take a gander as far as where we're at right now, what are potential targets that we could be looking at going into the remainder of this month, into December and January. This will be a little bit lengthy, but hopefully this information serve you well. So let's dive into a daily first. One thing that I'm looking at is, to be quite honest, I deleted my wave count that I had on a daily. I had to restructure, which actually works out for us because it gives us fresh eyes on this. But essentially what I'm looking at here is I was just looking at this wave count. I'm going to zoom out a little bit for us so you can see where that wave count was being established from. We hit over here. This essentially was a wave 5. Then we had an A, B, and C. And now this first impulse being a 1. And then we can just do the count from there. That being said, we're looking at 5 wave count here. This essentially being a 3 where we topped out at an all-time high. And this level right over here being essentially a wave 4. Now, I've said this before, and I'll kind of reiterate this. There is potential to come down to these levels, 27.85. I feel like there's more confluence in that area. But in the event that I'm wrong, we could always start pumping up. And we did bounce off of the 618 level. Wave 2 was at 0.5. It couldn't go to 0.5. It had to either be 0.382 or 618 or lower. And we're bouncing off of that 618. So we did have a good bounce inside of that area. Hopefully you guys did have the opportunity to look at swing longs from these levels. But if you didn't, don't fret. We have some lower time frame levels that we're looking at for potential entries. Now, currently we are showing that from a heat map perspective, we're running cool. So really, if you look at the transition of when the candles start to run hot and then they start to cool down, right? When we get a reversal is when we're piping hot on a daily, and then we'll have a little bit of a cool down and then we'll pop back up, didn't make a new all-time high. But this is really what I'm showing you right now, is that we're running pretty cool here in this area. So we really want to see these orange to red colors before we can actually start looking at some major shorts going into those positions. It's not to say that we can't take advantage of any shorts in the meantime while we're on lower time frames, but that's just something to be cognizant of. If you're looking at shorts, I would treat them as intradays, if not scalps, just considering the levels that we came to over here. There's going to be some major support here inside of these areas. So this is going to be an idea for us that I'm looking at going into January of next year, assuming that we are at a wave 4, then we're going to be establishing a wave 5 from a fib count perspective, or excuse me, fib zone perspective. This is essentially where I'm having wave 5 line up sometime inside of January. So that means going into the remainder of November, we're essentially going to be closing, bullish closing for November would be north of 3,600. So even if we get to the 3,600s and just bounce around in that area, that's still relatively going to be bullish. That puts us in a 60 percentile category of having a bullish remainder of the year. Now, this is going to be the ultimate target. This is just based off of mathematics for a wave 5, 1.272. If it's an advanced wave and we crush it all the way up to 1.618, that wouldn't be outside of the norm for a wave 5. But when you just do the measurements, this is really where wave 5 would line up. Now let's float down to a 4-hour. I do have a couple ideas that are bouncing around on this as well too, for short-term shorts, things like that. I'm looking at this wave count right over here, and what I was just mentioned to you before, as far as where the candles need to start being green and then changing different colors. You know, this is essentially lukewarm, for lack of better terminology. I'm looking at a wave count from here. This essentially would be a minor. I do need to adjust that because that is not a intermediate. This would be a minor. So it's going to be a wave count inside of a larger wave. So we're looking at this drop that we had down, this impulse up being 1, we have 2, and then this could have been 3, but I feel like that's really a small wave 3. I think we have room to get into this level right over here for wave 3. That would put us inside of this zone, 39.60. So that's something that I'm paying attention to as far as fib levels go. I'm looking at 39.60 being an area, and then having a retracement back down into either 0.236 or 0.382. 0.236 or lower, because wave 2 essentially was 0.382. That's a pretty flat level. So really wave 4 would have to be even more flat in comparison to wave 2. If not, then it's going to have a sharp retracement down into these levels. So these levels would not be outside of the norm once we start topping out here inside of this area. Going into a little bit higher as far as roughly around by the end of this month, close towards the end of the month, I think that we would start to see if we do top in this area, then we'd have an ABC correction. And these are the levels that I'd be looking at coming back and retesting this 3604. This 36 benchmark is where the battleground is. The battleground is anywhere from 3.5 to 3.8. So 3,500 to 3,800 is really going to be the battleground for it going into the month of November. If we can reclaim that, again, we are going to be bullish. But if we fail to reclaim these levels, reclaim that range, then bears are going to step in. They have a 40% chance of dropping us even lower. And I'll just flip right back to that daily. How low can they actually drop us to? These are the levels that they are going to be targeting. So if you're bearish, this is what you're targeting. If you're bullish, what I'm going over right now is essentially what you're targeting. So this is one of the levels that I'm looking at, seeing if we have a small retracement. If I was going to short this, obviously it would be a intraday slash scalp, because if we bounce right off of this area, then we're going to go higher into the 4,100s. Now, there are some additional ideas that I have that are layered over that. Just kind of giving you guys a refresher on that. We do have this total pattern that sits right over here. And remember, we do have a shaved head that sits inside this zone. So when I put on that wave count, gets us up to here, but we could get some advanced waves that put us right around 40, 44, 31, which really lines up with where that shaved head is at. So I wouldn't put it past in the event that we come down to this level, short little bounce, and then we have a big push into this area. So this is just speculative as far as an ABC. It's not something that's written in stone. I'm just giving you guys the idea as far as what it would look like for a wave count. Now I'm going to float down to lower time frames. We're going to hop over to a 55 and we're going to start looking at the heat maps, if you will. And really, this is what I'm sharing with you guys, right? We had that strong move up on Sunday. We had moves where we're essentially running really hot. And now we're starting to cool down. We're printing sixes and then we're looking for 7, 8, and 9. So these targets over here can be tapped into. And now we're going to float down to a 5-minute and I can show you what that looks like. We're going to add on some order blocks real quick and show you what those levels would look like as far as targets. So right now we are running cool on a 5-minute lower time frame. You can see where these candles are starting to run a little bit cool. We do have some breaker structures inside of these zones. But if we take this entire order block, that's going to put us inside of these zones right over here. So it's pretty much empty space once we get into this level right over here. Then we'd be tapping right into these zones, into these levels. I feel like there's a good amount of orders that are trying to buy this level right now. And even bears are trying to push inside this area. So don't be fooled if you see a wick to the upside or even a strong push down to the downside. Money Man is stepping in these levels, because when you have two order blocks that are forming inside this area, Money Man, really all they want to do is just take liquidity. So they're going to take it on both sides. So people that are trying to short here, late shorts, they're going to be taken out inside this zone. One area that we're looking at right now, if you recall from my 5-minute strategy, we did have Asia high and Asia low. Those were both broken. I gave you guys an update on that this morning and gave you the update before it happened yesterday. Essentially, I was trading this pattern right over here. We were running kind of hot inside of this zone. We're actually really running hot over here. We had a small little cool down, came back up, ran a little hot, got cool again. So that was showing us that there was still a lot of buying action going on here. And then if I zoom in on this, you see how this turned really like a light blue, even green. So that's really cool. So it had to run a little bit hotter before it had some type of retracement. That being said, we're looking for, on a 5-minute, if we are going to go to the upside, we're looking for New York low to be retested at the bare minimum. I'm going to float down even to a lower time frame and start showing you guys what this looks like. We do have quite a few shaved heads inside the zone. Like the entire area over here would need to be cleared as far as imbalance, which puts us right around the 5-minute low for New York open. Also coupled with that, we do have, let's go back over to a 55. Actually, I'm going to go over to an 89 real quick for us. You can see how we ran pretty hot on that. We do have this thick order block, and we have a 34.76 fib level that sits inside this zone. This is one of the areas that I was looking at for a potential short. So those that are looking for shorts, this is what I was looking at. This kind of coincides with one of the ideas that I have for a 4-hour. So in the event that we get into this order block, because I really want us to test this order block, it makes a lot more sense for me. There's a 0.76 fib right around 37.12. And if we're going to have a bearish month and close bearish, then this would be the level that bears really need to step in, defend that area, and then we get a big, massive push back down. Ethereum is notorious for retracing pumps. So I wouldn't put it past it that we get a push back down to these levels, especially individuals that were long in this area expecting higher highs. This is just going to be part of the norm for Ethereum. Going over to a daily, just kind of reference to that, we're inside of a wave 4. Wave 4s are complex, meaning they could have pumps up and then retrace 80% almost of that move up. So wave 4s can be quite difficult in the sense of finding swing trades. Typically, these are going to be treated as intraday. It only becomes a swing when you actually find the bottom or the top, depending on that wave count, as the move goes. So while you're in it, married to it, there are high probabilities that you come right back down. So going back over to that 89 minutes that I was looking at, this is one of the ideas for the short. This is essentially what we're going to be looking at. This essentially is a total pattern. It's the opposite of what we saw in the 4-hour. The 4-hour was a bullish total. This is essentially a bearish total pattern. As far as the lead up phase is printing a 7. If you recall from the class I gave on Thursday, we really want to see 13. So this is kind of, this trend essentially is not over with. And although it did run pretty high, it's starting to cool down here in these areas. This is why I think inside of this zone 34.76, inside of this order block, we could get a small little bounce in this area, push us right back into this zone, and then start running hot again. A kind of example of what that looks like, we're looking for something like this, if you will, right? We ran hot, we ran down cool, and then we came up again into these levels. So we're looking for something that's similar to that. Right now, we do have a change of character, and we do have a break of structure on that 89 minute. Now, if we get a change of character here, then we're going to be looking for a break of structure on this move to the downside, and then looking to long that. Where that happens and where that occurs, that's where we're going to start utilizing that 5 minutes and start looking at these order blocks down in these levels. That's why I was mentioning these levels we can be tapping into with problem, because there's a good amount of orders that sit inside that area. Now, if you guys have questions, if you're confused about any of this, please, my DMs are open. Feel free to reach out to me. Inside of the war room, we are discussing setups. Try to put your setups before the move happens. So this way it counts towards the campaign that we're running for Christmas. Now, I do have a treat for you guys that I'll be releasing later on this week, or at least the details of that later this week. It does have to do with the indicators that I use, and it also has to tie into the volume that you're doing on Bytunix. So pay attention as we go through the course of the week. As I mentioned before, if you have questions for me, feel free to reach out to me. Outside of that, hopefully this information serves you guys well. Be profitable this week, be safe, and above all, God bless you. Peace.